I'll have to track it down. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jomo Stewart here at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. It is Tuesday, November 14th, just after 8 a.m. And we're here for our latest Energy for Alaska Task Force meeting. We do have a couple of special guests. I want to acknowledge we have a Gene Terrio in the house. So we have President Terrio is here. But we have our friends from Alaska Renewables. So Mr. Perkins, Andrew, good to see you, sir. And their new employee, Miss Faith Tyson. And so we're here to get a little update briefing on the Shovel Creek Wind Project. But anything else you gentlemen would like to talk about? Because I know that you are a going concern. All right, so without further ado, just as a reminder to the gang, as always, this is for all of us. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, I'll be monitoring the participant list. I'll be managing the chat. However, you can go ahead and just take yourself off mute and fire away. Again, we're a conversational group here. All right. So without further ado, gentlemen and miss, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Jomo. Thanks for inviting us back again. I think last time we were here was almost a year ago. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
When we introduced ourselves as a company and talked a little bit about the work we were working on to bring wind projects to Alaska. It's been a very exciting year, and we've made a lot of progress, and we still have a lot of work to do. But I think as a team, we were reflecting on everything that's happened this year and everything that we've worked on, and we're just really proud, and we're excited to be and grateful to be part of this community, and working with everyone to bring a project like Shovel Creek and put it on the table and begin to turn it into something more real that we can build in the next couple of years. So I think one of the biggest things is that as a company we've grown, and we've in addition to a number of engineering consultants, environmental consultants, and field work and additional advisors that we've brought on to help us in all the work areas of wind project development. We also hired our first full-time employee, and that's Faith. And so Faith, maybe you can give an introduction to the community here and what your role is on our team.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and thanks, Joe and team, for having us. My name is Faith. I grew up in Utqiagvik, and I'm a tribal citizen of the native village of Shishmaref. I am located in Anchorage, and my background is really in community well-being and all of the moving pieces. So I'm really excited to be part of the Alaska Renewable team, running a lot of the community engagement, and a big part of it is accountability. And I think that's not something that I have found in the field, is like having a position specifically, not just for community engagement, but really to hold the company accountable to the community's needs, and also like the other pieces, so like tribal organizations and ANCs. And that's my role here. I also just really love the snow, and I have been cross-stitching like my grandma did. And I have 3 little ones. So yeah, thanks for having us again.
Awesome, thanks. And Matt, do you want to introduce yourself? I think most people know you, but if not.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see so many familiar names here, and a couple new, although at this stage in the year, if I met you and I forgot, I'm sorry, but definitely a couple of new names. Yeah, my name is Matt Perkins, and I'm a serial technology, clean energy guy. Worked at General Electric for 10 years, doing all sorts of new technologies there all around the world. Always more efficient, less carbon, regardless of industry, whether it was even gas, how do we make that more efficient? And then got into startups, and this is my third startup. Yeah, and Faith, that was a great introduction. I think one of the reasons we hired Faith as our first employee was Andrew and I and our consultants, who are sort of aligned with the company's mission, but outside of the company, and for good reason, right? When you're hiring bird biologists to count birds, they can't be an employee of the company. They need to stand alone as part of their own organization. But Andrew and I and those consultants, we have been running around so hard trying to put this together, and to create Faith's role was a no-brainer for us as our first hire, because it really creates a dedicated role within the company to focus on, as she said, the community's well-being, and on holding us accountable to the needs and concerns and opportunities as well of the community. Because I'm an engineer. I think about dollars and cents. I think about safe construction and good technologies, and then my brain is full, and it's 11 p.m. and I need to go to bed, my wife tells me. So anyway, that's long enough of an intro for me, but really nice to see you all, and thanks, Jomo, for setting this up.
Right, thanks, Matt. Yeah, and for those of you that don't know me, my name's Andrew McDonald. Yeah, I've been here in Fairbanks for the last decade or so. I came here to work at the university, and got attracted to the idea of working on energy projects. And so my background is not as an energy developer, but really looking at the problem statements and opportunities that we have here in our local community for new energy sources. I think before we share a few update slides, this past weekend was a busy one for us. As we mentioned, we had a series of community meetings in the Goldstream Valley at the Kankunkel Community Center, and that was just a really great opportunity for us to update the community on the status of the project and our latest iteration of the design of Shovel Creek Wind, and then also really hear from not just a lot of the energy wonks that are in the audience here, but also just a broader cross section of the community that will be important in terms of living with and benefiting from the project in the future. And so we heard from a lot of people, our neighbors that live along Murphy Dome Road, and people that people that frequent the area in terms of for berry picking, like my family does, for example, and just hearing those considerations and those perspectives, and our neighbors current uses and concerns about the land and what a project would mean. And so it's really an opportunity. It's been a great opportunity, I think, for people to ask questions, and I hope to do that today as well, as we discuss a little bit more about where we've come in the last year. Yeah, so we continue to shape the project, and we continue to be students of that process and what this project would mean for the community. And so I think that's an important part of this place-based energy endeavor that we seek to solve. So it has to fit into our community, and we're really committed to listening to the community and responding to that. Matt, maybe you can flip through to the overall problem statement slide. Maybe we can, yeah. So we talked a little bit about this last year when I was here, but just the underlying motivation of why we began putting together wind energy projects in the interior and the broader Alaska is because of our energy needs and serving our own community here. We have highly volatile prices in energy, and that has an impact on our economies and our air quality. And so being able to provide a local source of renewable energy is a key mechanism at which we can solve not just that, but also just the energy insecurity issues and grid reliability, and then as I mentioned, reducing carbon dioxide pollution and local air pollution to make sure Fairbanks continues to be a good place to live and with cleaner air. So we've been focused on just identifying and developing these local projects that can provide energy close and directly to where our load centers are. Matt, if you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, and so overall, our goal as this hasn't changed from last year, but delivering a transformative, clean, sustainable, and reliable, and also cost-reducing energy supply for Alaska. I think many of these things are things that the anybody could get behind, and I think what we're continuing to learn is how to best piece these different parts of a real project together in a way that it meets all of these needs and the needs of the community. On the energy security piece, next slide, please, Matt. It's really about right now. If you look on the right-hand side, this is the chart. There is the orange range at the top of that bar is basically the range in power that our current electrical grid uses. Mostly between the summer and winter, the summer when it's lower and the winter when it's higher and very cold at the max, the top of that orange bar on the right. And so what our utility does currently is they take a mix of their current resources, which includes primarily coal, naphtha, diesel, and a little bit of existing renewables, 6% wind and 6% hydro, roughly. And they stack all those bars together, and that makes up the mix of power that is powering our lights today. The issue is that many of these, in order to stack these bars high enough to meet that, to be in that between the min and max load there and meet our grid load at any given time, most of the time we're tapping into higher cost resources, including naphtha, which comes off the pipeline, or gas power that's being transported up the intertie into Fairbanks. And so beyond that, beyond the coal resources, a large chunk of which is planned to retire in a couple of years, the main source of energy that we can turn to is diesel. And so this kind of brings part of the motivation of what other mix of energy can we bring to the system that can provide stable, low-cost energy that we can stack those bars and make sure our energy costs come up low, and we can rely upon these energy sources. I learned just this weekend that all three of the coal power plants on the left were down this past weekend, and so we were reliant heavily on the more expensive resources of diesel and naphtha, and so those are situations that we want to avoid going into the future. Matt, can you flip forward? So, and this is a plot that Matt put together just from Golden Valley's data of the fuel and purchase power portion of our budget. That's not the of our energy bills, and that's not the only charge, but there's there in addition we have to pay for the power plants and grid services and maintenance itself. But as you can see, the fuel and purchase power portion of the bill fluctuates widely from month to month and year to year. And in general, it's on an upward trajectory, somewhere around 12 cents per kilowatt hour just for that purchase power. And that's, as we said, a mix of gas power coming up the intertie, coal operations and maintenance costs, and then also diesel and naphtha fuels, liquid fuels from the pipeline or refineries in Valdez, for example. And so wind power that we can get locally in, from adjacent to our community here comes out around the lowest points of these dips in these curves here, basically. And so if we, and moreover, it would be a fixed contracted price for a long-term power purchase agreement. So the utility, Golden Valley Electric Association, would pay only for delivered kilowatt hours that the wind project delivers to the grid, and that would be at that low fixed price of around 8 cents per kilowatt hour for the duration of the project. If the utility selects that type of project. And so this will have the effect of, this project could represent up to a third of Golden Valley's energy mix, and in doing so would significantly reduce those bumps and peaks in the line and stabilize and keep that fuel and purchase power cost as close to the lowest price that we can see on there as possible. Next slide, Matt. And so we've looked at a variety of different technologies, and really the question is, what's available here? What matches our needs on the grid, especially our winter peaking need for energy, and what has the lowest cost, and what has the shortest time to deploy, so that we can use it to meet our energy needs of today and tomorrow. And that's where we've really focused in on wind as a big part of that energy mix. And as a team, we're a small team. You're Matt and Faith and I are the only full-time employees of Alaska Renewables. And so we must focus and prioritize our efforts. And so that's why we've focused on wind and bringing projects like that into the mix here. Go ahead and flip to the next slide, Matt. And so over the last couple of years, really, but especially in the last year since we last spoke to this group, we've made a lot of progress in conjunction with our partners, our engineering partners, our procurement partners, and the suppliers of wind turbine technology, and our environmental consultants, and just assessing, and our own team in terms of putting up new Met Tower at that site, Met 104 there towards the southwest of the project. And so growing our overall development campaign so that we can be on track to deliver a project by 2026, but operational by 2026, should the utility and the community decide to move forward with this. And so here's our latest drawings and map and overview of what the project would look like. It's located at 20 some miles to the west of Fairbanks, and on the ridge lines beginning about 2 miles to the west of Murphy Dome, the summit of Murphy Dome, where the road ends there by the Air Force Station, which is that black box at the top, at the end of Murphy Dome Road there. The project would be located out Murphy Dome Extension Road, or what it's also known as the Bennett Highway. It's not really much of a highway. If anybody's been out there, it's more of a very rough road that allows access down to the Chattanooga River. But essentially the project would be constructed as a number of strings of turbines that would be located on side ridges off of that road. And the project would be accessed by bringing the equipment and materials up to that site and constructing anywhere from 25 to 50 wind turbines on the ridges there to the west of town. As we mentioned, the project could supply up to a third of Golden Valley's energy supply, and the project would have a nameplate capacity of anywhere between 110 to 200 megawatts in power output. And so that's the equivalent of 46,000 homes, which is more homes than actually exist in Fairbanks, one might note. But that's a reflection of the fact that that a lot of our energy needs come from commercial and industrial users as well. And so overall, it would make up a sizable percentage of the grid once constructed. It would also sizably reduce our emissions of CO2 by about 330,000 tons per year. So the project would involve new improved roads along the project in order to allow access to the turbines. And so that would mean improving the Murphy Dome Extension Road. There may be some improvements along Murphy Dome Road itself that are necessary to smooth the transport of those turbine components up the hill, as well as extensions of new road out those side ridges where these orange dots are located. And those orange dots are potential turbine sites. And then the blue triangles are a combination of the three northern ones are the existing Met towers, meteorological towers that Golden Valley deployed about a year ago. And then the blue one, Met 104, there further to the southwest, is one that we deployed ourselves in October, September, or early October. And then we're planning to install a fifth one likely next summer at that Met 105 station. We've been considering different transmission lines that are alignments that would be required to connect the project up to the grid. And you can see two of those here. And the project may use either one or both of those alignments, depending on what the results of the ongoing electrical interconnection studies for the project would recommend. And the idea is which routes can provide the most reliable connection to the grid and the most cost-effective connection to the grid, as well as just balancing out all of the engineering behind grid stability and just power flow in terms of where we can connect to those existing power lines. It may also depend on the availability of various grants and incentives that both the utility and Alaska Renewables are applying for new opportunities that are coming out from USDA, the New Era program, for example, and the PACE program, both of which would provide low-cost financing or forgivable loans or grants to offset the costs of not just energy projects like Shovel Creek, but also the associated infrastructure like battery energy storage or transmission upgrades that may be necessary to better interconnect and integrate these resources into the grid. Maybe I should take a pause. Yeah,
just
thanks for raising your hand.
Yeah, question. Where you put the new Met towers, are you looking to find within that wind regime the best spot? I mean, are you searching for a better spot or looking to expand the resource so you could potentially get up to the 50 towers?
Yeah, that's a good question. What it will allow us to do is to combine those Met data with the models and the topography models and the climatology models to map out the wind resource on basically like a 50-meter resolution, and so much higher resolution than the towers themselves, and much higher resolution than the ultimate turbines will be. And so it will enable us to help microsite the individual turbines, but also make decisions like more general decisions, like does it make more sense to, you know, if the project is say 150 megawatts, you know, which of those turbine sites should we focus on? Should we focus primarily on, should we leave off the, you know, the 25% of turbines that are to the south, or should we leave off the 25% are to the north or in the middle? You know, what is the best place, to your question, to put those? And it will also, you know, allow us to have some optionality, but that data has been very useful to, you know, we're coming back a year later, and we can say now that, you know, that the wind resource is quite strong and will result in very high capacity factors from a project like this, higher than the existing Eva Creek project. And that's not necessarily due to a large difference in the wind resource, but it's mostly due to like a change, an improvement in the technology since 2011 when that project was constructed. The turbine rotor areas will be a little bit larger and just more efficient at harvesting that energy. So we've moved kind of beyond this validation stage of we're confident that this is a strong resource that will be a good project, and more now into the refining stage of, you know, where do we microsite those turbines, exactly how much power will it produce at what times of year, and questions like that. Mr. Davies, yes, I see a hand there online.
Yeah, thanks. Well, you mentioned, my question was, do you have an estimate now of your wintertime capacity factor?
I don't have it broken down in my head. Maybe Matt, you can pull up the proposal that or our meteorological study that breaks it down by month. And you can provide that answer. But in general, the winds are much more sustained in the wintertime. It's actually very rarely that during the summer we would reach the peak project output in terms of the number of megawatts of power being produced by the facility, but it's actually quite common during the winter that we're at that peak output, which is actually a great benefit to our grid, because unlike solar, which has its maximum in the, you know, from the spring and through the summer, you know, wind energy pairs really well with our loads, our peaking loads in the winter when it's cold and dark. And so I think I think just off the top of my head, I think the capacity factors in those winter months approach 50-60% in the winter months.
And one other quick question, if you could, the Moose Creek and the Rosie Creek switching stations, do those exist now, or would they be new ones?
They would be new ones, but those would be fairly limited infrastructure. It's basically like it's a big switch that allows the power to be cut off at that point. It's not like a substation like we would have at the on-site. And maybe Matt, actually, if you go to the next slide, we can show you a picture. Is it the next slide? Maybe the next one. No, keep going. Yeah, right there. There's a picture of a substation. And I think that's maybe our resident Golden Valley engineer, Dan Bishop, on that picture there, and transmission lines. And so this is, if you've seen the transmission line that goes around from the Gold Hill substation up to Fort Knox and crosses over Murphy Dome Road, and then also crosses over the Steese Highway as well on its way to Fort Knox, that would be something similar in terms of the transmission lines. And then the switching stations would be much smaller than what you see here. This is more like a substation that you would see at the wind project itself, where we're upgrading the voltage from the wind turbines from roughly 33 kV to the transmission voltages that are common throughout the system. And so it would be a smaller facility at those switching station locations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, I don't know if you want to speak to this. It's maybe a little hard for people to see, but here's the net capacity factors. Usually green means good, red means bad, but in this case, it's the opposite. So during the winter, Andrew was, as usual, under promising, and this would indicate we may over deliver. In the summer, it's a lower capacity factor. Andrew, I don't know. Do you want to take over presenting this?
Yeah, no, the low numbers, sure I can. The low numbers are, so in the summer, you're looking at a 25% capacity factor. And then in the winter, December, for example, reaching over 60% of its nameplate capacity. So what does that mean? That means if we had a 100 megawatt project, that on average in the month of December, during that time of day, in the middle of the day, we would be producing and in through the evening hours, we would be producing about 60 megawatts of power on average in those months and time periods. And so this plot, if you did a similar color plot for the system load, you might see something similar, aside from the fact that I think during the summer, the wind is a little bit stronger at nighttime, so the top and the bottom of the plot, as opposed to right in the middle of the day. But again, that's another place where our projects pair well with solar resource, because that's right, that hole that you see where we have low capacity factors in the summer and in the middle of the day is right when solar is doing its best job of delivering great production to the grid, either from net metering projects at houses, individual homes and businesses, or utility scale projects like the one that Golden Valley has operating, or the one that's proposed in Nenana.
I would leave the floor open for more questions.
Yeah.
John, it looked like you had your hand up, but then you pulled it back down.
Yeah, no, I got my question answered. Thank you.
Okay. Well, again, then just a reminder that again, we're open for questions and comments.
And I don't necessarily, I'm not sure if I see everybody on there, but maybe if if you have a question, just speak up. So feel free, or drop something in the chat. We can see that.
So regarding
Okay.
this location, again, the
Yeah.
TVA put theirs out there in Delta Junction, at Eva Creek. And this is very close to town and right off
Yeah.
their system. So I just wonder if it's comparable, why they ended up going so far afield.
Why did Golden Valley put it at in Healy, outside of Healy, the Eva Creek project? It's a good question. When in 2003, when they put Met towers up at this site and at the site down near Healy, they found that the wind resource, as I mentioned, was relatively similar at the site, but actually and importantly, it was not correlated with each other. And so when the wind is blowing at Shovel Creek, it's not often blowing at the Eva Creek project, which could provide additional benefits in balancing out the availability of, and smoothing out the availability of wind energy on the system. But it just I'm not sure why I think it was, each project has its own advantages and disadvantages. We also have a proposal for and the option of developing a project adjacent to the Eva Creek project, and down near Healy on a site called Walker Dome. And that's a lease agreement that we've worked out with Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority on lands near the existing project down there. But we've studied this, and we think that this project that at Shovel Creek offers the best mix of economics and balance and diversity of wind resource to the grid. And so and it's also a little bit less challenging in the sense that there's direct road access to the site. And so unlike at Eva Creek, you have to either take a train and put your components on a train to get them there, or we would have to build a new bridge across the Nenana River. And so those factors add costs and logistical complexity. And so this project is better connected. It's also closer to the load center, so it would result in lower losses, transmission losses, in terms of delivering this energy to the grid.
Mike, Rep Prox, and then we'll go to you, Rich.
Oh, no, he was up first.
All right, well, go ahead, Rich.
Okay. Richard.
Yeah, I this picture that I have in my screen right now,
Yeah.
it kind of clears up my question, but I wondered, what's the fire risk? Well, that area out there, on the north side of Murphy Dome has had several recent fires.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like this is a high fire risk, but about the transmission lines it might be. I just wondered what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a consideration. I think there's risks, potential risks and benefits from a fire perspective. On one level, there will be increased and better access for resources to get out to these sites. And so, the namesake of the Shovel Creek Wind Project is actually the 2019 Shovel Creek wildfire, which, as you mentioned, is in this area and burned quite a number of acres and threatened some of the development on the outside of town, on the outskirts of town. And so in some ways, like that northern ridge of if you can flip back to the map, that northern ridge of the project that extends up there towards Met 103 represents is actually along one of the fire breaks that crews put in with a dozer when that happened. And so if you think about the difference now, or not now, but like after the project is built, there will be nice roads that go out beyond the turbines, that provide better access to these ridge lines, which could serve as a fire break and a conduit for deploying additional resources to the area as well. In addition, the Moose Creek alignment for the potential transmission alignment would mostly follow the existing large fire break that's along Old Murphy Dome Road there at the top of the hill. And that's quite a wide fire break feature that was used during those fire events to prevent the fire from reaching into the more developed side of the southerly aspects. And so that would be maintained, and with additional electrical infrastructure there, it would probably be maintained more aggressively in terms of ensuring that that stays clear, and that the transmission lines themselves don't serve as a source for a fire on its own. And so if you think about it, actually, like if you look at the existing transmission that goes up along, like through what is labeled there as the potential future Moose Creek switching station, and up along towards the Fort Knox, it'll actually allow a nice additional ring of access and fire break potential, completely surrounding this quadrant of our town, essentially. Yeah, and so I think there are some considerations. Go ahead, Matt. You want to?
I was only going to add to the answer. I mean, for context, this is not exactly the transmission right of way intended, but to give a sense for what that would be, both in terms of the recreational access, but also the impact on the landscape, and the impact from a fire break. There's been a lot of advancement, in particular because of California and Pacific Gas and Electric and the relationship between transmission lines. Now, in California, you have much taller trees, and so but there is a lot of advancement, and the wildfire mitigation measures underneath transmission lines are something that's, I should say, unfortunately now very well understood. So to me, to echo what Andrew said, net benefit probably, but definitely something that's on our mind, because just like any power plant, if it's not operating, then it's failing in its mission. So anyway, I just show the transmission line for those of you to visualize as well.
Representative Prox, you had a question?
Yeah, how far along are you in the permitting process? I'm guessing that you're going to need an overall permit for the turbines, and then for, well, maybe not, some road improvements, transmission line, et cetera.
Yep, exactly. Matt, do you want to switch to like your roadmap slide here and give an overview on that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to, making sure I'm paying attention here. Yeah, hey, Representative Prax, nice to see you. Sorry, I'm not there in person today, back in Anchorage. So, gosh, there are, I think, about 24 individual permits required at the federal, state, and even some at the borough level as well, related to a project like this. And so, fundamentally, most of these permits are relatively straightforward in the context that they require us to gather a known set of data, and then do an analysis of that data and incorporate that into project design, and then make a recommendation. So I'd highlight that in particular, birds are one of the biggest questions from Fish and Wildlife, and from ourselves, and from our friends in the ornithology community, and our friends at Audubon, Alaska. So we've been staffing bird biologists on the project site periodically since 2022, actually, and they, I mentioned at the very beginning of the call, these are third-party entities who have their own reputation and integrity. They're not part of our team. So, their work, like ABR and Stantec, their work stands, its own test of ethics, frankly, to make sure that we have a totally clean data set. So those are, should there be an enormous number of eagles found, for example, then we would be required to get an eagle take permit. But so far, we're not really seeing that on this site. Other considerations, similar with wetlands, the good news for this particular project is it's in the uplands. So there are not in the initial field work, major wetlands detected on the site. Actually, I think I have a slide even showing some of these points. Sorry, I just remembered that. So these, just stepping back, these yellow dots represent a few of the Eagle Point collection places. And the other thing I forgot to say about birds is we have a special radar machine, and it'll be put in different places over time that just, like 24/7. You don't need to have a person out there all the time, but that machine owned by the third-party biologists and operated by them has been collecting a lot of data on migratory pathways, which is, of course, a huge consideration for Alaska in particular. And then on the wetlands side, what you can see is initial delineations showing some slight hydrological activity, but mostly, as anyone who's been in this area knows, it's pretty darn dry, for the vast width of the mesa or ridgeline out there. I think probably other permits that I'd flag or highlight are standard construction permits related to stormwater and water access. And again, the project doesn't use much water in the long term. It does use a fair amount, during the construction of the foundations, but that's pretty typical. So your question, Representative Prax, was how far along are we? We're probably at least a year to a year and a half away from the completion of all the permits. But if you compare that to really nearly any other form of electricity generation, besides perhaps solar, which can be done even faster, that's pretty fast. And a lot of folks will suggest other technologies which have other pros and cons. But one of the reason people have gotten, I'd say, so far along with wind in the world, not just in North America, as the second most installed technology in the last 10, 15 years, is because it's clearly understood what it does. And, you need to apply that understanding to the nuances of a particular site and its exact ecology, its exact, geotechnical, et cetera. But we've got a lot of data on it. Whereas the last time we did a big nuclear project or a hydro was a long time ago. So there's a lot of kind of, other considerations for those technologies. I could go on and on, but did I answer your question?
Not quite. I guess at one level, you had these meetings out in Goldstream. Great, you got to reach out to people to let them know sooner than later. Otherwise, you get surprised, which we found with some of the mining projects. And then the other one, there is Minto Flats. You're on the edge of Minto Flats. I don't know how that affects the bird hunting and even noise impacts and whatnot out there. And my concern, I suppose, is that there just is a whole lot of permitting uncertainty, and it seems like 2000, I think you said 2026. That's kind of a long ways off, but it kind of isn't for the permitting process. The permitting risk seems fairly high.
I mean, I think to Matt's point, it's a well-established process, but that doesn't mean that there are risks. That's as developers, that's what we have to manage all the time. And yes, is there a chance that there could be, some show-stopping discovery? I suppose, but now that we're a year into our field observations, we just haven't seen the, we haven't seen the birds to, out at site. It's our bird biologists come back and they complain that they're very bored because there's not a lot of bird activity out there at all. It's mostly like ravens and a few small birds and grouse that are along the road eating pebbles. So I think we're beginning to emerge from this like period of like high uncertainty and high amount of risk, and now it's more, it's more about taking this data now to the regulators and discussing, and then having them model what those risks actually translate into. And then the other thing is that, is that there is a wealth of data from existing wind projects in Alaska, and the Eva Creek Wind Project, for example, is one example, and ABR did a Fairbanks-based consulting company that we have working on our southern project near Anchorage. They did the post-construction mortality surveys for birds there at Eva Creek, and found very, very low numbers of only a few small bird carcasses over many months of sampling, and so those and that was even in a situation where there was known eagle nests within a couple of miles of the site of the project turbines. And so I think there is data out there that suggests that these are not going to be major concerns, unless we see something unless we find something that we haven't noticed before. But as we said, we think that risk is tailing off as we get further into development.
And I was
Actually, hold on, everybody. Please, Matt, and then we're going to let Mr. Chapin, John, and then you.
Right. Sorry about that. A little hard to read the body language. I'm sorry. I drove back to Anchorage to just deal with my driveway, and it wasn't there in person. The only thing I'd add, Representative Prax, is sound. Sound is a great question, and I'd encourage anyone who hasn't been to Eva Creek before to or Fire Island, but Eva Creek's a lot easier to get to. We have a lot of interest from the community in a field trip down there to just see it for yourselves, get a feel for it yourselves. And I think that's, personally, having visited wind farms starting as a teenager, I have a good sense for it, and I can attest that it's worth a lot more than my words, or frankly even Andrew's words. But just around sound, it is a big question. So here's the turbine array, as you can see, and I'll just refer to this legend down here that's 1 mile. So about little more than the width of my cursor. I don't know if that's coming through, is about a half mile. At about 300 meters from a wind farm, it's 35 to 45 decibels, which is about the sound of your dishwasher or your refrigerator. So now, because sound drops with the inverse square, as in every time you double the distance, it goes down by 1/4. By the time you get down to the Minto Flats, I'll personally vouch and guarantee that it will be imperceptible. That's quite a few miles away. But to be fair, when if you go underneath, if you're berry picking underneath it, you'll hear the wind because it's windy when they turn, and you'll hear the whooshing noise. And I think the best way to get a sense for that is to visit an operating farm. So just a comment there on sound.
Mr. Chapin.
I'm curious how the availability of federal money to support wind energy plays into the feasibility and cost and time frame for this project.
Matt, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, it's a vital opportunity at this moment in time. I mean, there's we could have Terry, we could have the political version of the conversation, but for me, it's just an economist's version. You know, here in Alaska, we have an opportunity to build this power plant with half of the cost of it covered by the federal government. And whether you like that or not, to me, that's a moment in time. And it's a moment in time that, as an economist and as an environmentalist, I take very seriously, because who knows what will happen with that. Now, there are, I will only note, there are a lot of subsidies for a lot of energy technologies right now. You want to do carbon capture and sequestration, you want to do nuclear, you want to do clean coal, you know, whatever you want to do, those subsidies are available, because right now we live in a kind of all of the above federal policy, frankly. But this was still the economic winner for us when we analyzed all those technologies. And some of those federal programs have sort of been baked in, and I don't think will go away regardless of the political risk that we see. My wife, I don't read the news too much, but my wife just told me that government might shut down again before our next flight for the holidays. So some of those are not really at risk, I don't think, but there are other opportunities that could even further improve it, that Golden Valley is pursuing and we're pursuing. And those, I'd say, I don't know if those are going to be there or not. So for us, that just creates a little urgency for, hey, you know, when the program is there, we should take advantage of it.
Does this mean that if there is federal funding there, or more federal funding there, that this would decrease the cost of power to GVEA, or that it would increase the size of the project that you might be able to deploy? How would you change the project depending on availability of federal funds?
Yeah, the size of the project could not get larger than what we've shown here, simply because of the lease area and what we've been permitting for. There are other sites around the interior that are interesting and could be viable parts of GVA's future, or the rail belt's future. But this project size could not be larger physically, regardless of that. With respect to the opportunities to lower the total cost of electricity even further than what Andrew spoke to earlier, this chart here, where with what is certainly there, it is our goal to stabilize and lower these rates. But frankly, only by a couple percent, because that's the best that economics with inflation and everything else, you know, allows us to do. And you can bet that with Andrew paying electricity bills to GVA and me to Chugach, like, we personally care about lowering it. So the federal funds that are beyond the ones that are already, I'd say, baked in, the ones that are potentially out there as well, that are sort of a little more specific, and you have to apply for and are awarded. I won't speak for Golden Valley, but my view is that those could massively decrease the cost of electricity. And from a sort of mission statement perspective, I think that would be huge. And we are not the type to set those expectations until there's a lot of certainty. So we don't talk about that too much. But yeah, the short answer is this chart doesn't go low enough for how low it could potentially be if you won all of the right programs out there.
But it sounds like you know enough about the opportunities for federal funding that it's not going to turn out that you wouldn't be able to do the project, for example.
Correct. Yeah, there's enough certainty. Yeah, in particular in the tax code, because the 50% of the project cost being covered by tax code, you know, as a you know, reimbursement, that one's pretty clear. But again, like, who knows what Congress will do, right? So yeah, our view is grab it while it's available, you know.
Okay, well, we have gotten to the top of the hour. I'm not sure how far we got through the presentation slides.
That's fine.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we can keep going, but yeah, and to respect everybody else's time, I think you know, I don't know, what else do we have on there, Matt? Yeah, we've got more stuff, but I don't
You got
know
more
if this
goodies?
is-
Well, you know, we just did a double up presentation. Oh, Somebody's internet connection is unstable. We just did a double up presentation regarding Iceland and the Icelandic electric grid
Yeah.
because we only got about halfway through the presentation before we ran out of time. I would open it up to the group. If you all have further future availability, we can end up circling back around to work our way through the rest of this presentation. It's fascinating. It's very interesting. What do you think, guys?
Just keep going for a while.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I've got a few more minutes this morning if you want to push a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, we only have a couple more slides that we could show you real quick. Matt, do you want to show like
My one big question. So that's the dome. That's the
that's Murphy Dome.
that's the Air Force
Yep.
facility.
Yep.
What exactly do they do up there? Is there any data? Are they collecting data at all?
Jomo, if we told you, we'd have to kill you.
All right, never mind. I just always wondered if it was just kind of a radar site, maybe for location, or if they were again doing, acquiring any data, atmospherics that might have helped you all regarding site selection.
We haven't used any of the data. There is a wind turbine up there at the top of the hill, and facilities up there. We haven't used that data. Haven't gotten access to it. Maybe we could, but in reality, the wind industry has very strict standards for how that data is collected on the types of towers and the proximity to the actual project. It has to be within the project, and each turbine has to be within about 2 or 3 kilometers of a meteorological tower for this purpose. And so the data out there wouldn't be that useful for these purposes, but we have submitted our application into the black box that is the DoD evaluation, and they've determined that there's no conflict of use in terms of putting the wind turbines on the hill 2.5 miles and beyond, further beyond the existing facilities there.
Okay.
Matt, do you want to give a quick show of the time-lapse video?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me see if I can optimize for video clip and share, or I won't share sound. We don't need the sound, but let's see if this works. Let me know if it's.
Yeah, it's going. Yeah, great. Maybe a little bit jerky, but so this is just gives you an idea of the construction process. So each of these components, that each wind turbine consists of about 11 major components that will need to be delivered by truck to the site. Now we lost it. There's a big box in the middle. And then at each turbine site, there will be a little laydown pad, so the components can be set down next to the crane and next to the turbine foundation, and then the large crane will be used to lift the major components up, and there will be also a supporting crane to help move things around on the pad as well. But basically, these components get hoisted up one piece at a time, and over the course of about 2 days, you can install one turbine. And the tower that you see going up right now, the nacelle, which is the mechanical box that houses, it's about the size of a school bus, that houses all the mechanical and electrical components of the turbine, and then the hub and the blades that get mounted to the front of that. This is a video from one of our likely supplier, Vestas, one of our likely suppliers of wind turbines. So these would be 4.2 megawatt machines that have a wingspan of about 150 meters across, and standing on the ground or from the ground level to the tip of the blade it's approximately 640 feet to the tip of the to the top of the structure of the blade itself, or about 350 feet to the hub where that device will be located, where the main mechanical components will be located.
And how far off the ground is the lowest point of the blade?
So it's if we go with the 105 meter, and it's a 150 meters, so it's 105 minus 75. It's similar to Eva Creek. And so we're looking at about 30 meters off the ground, so a little bit more than 100 feet at the lowest point.
So not even jump up and touch, let
No,
alone
no,
get
no.
smacked in the side of the head walking
No.
by. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Question, when you were talking about Golden Valley's existing energy mix
Mhm.
and the cost associated with that, that's the generation that'll firm up your power.
Yes.
And so I take comfort in the fact that you're evaluating the wind regime out there in conjunction with Golden Valley. I mean, they've put some net towers on.
Yep.
They've looked at this site before.
Yeah.
But what's the relationship now and understanding as far as how you firm that power up and the
Mhm.
cost of firming that power up?
Yeah.
Because as you bring on a unit of power from the wind, they have to back off, a unit from
Yep.
their existing generation,
Mhm.
which means that remaining generation is now less efficient.
Less efficient, but burning a lot less fuel, which is very expensive. Yeah,
But like the LN 6000 at North Pole,
Yeah.
they can only back it down a certain amount.
exactly.
And then the steam and the free power
Yeah.
completely disappears.
Yep. Yeah.
And so
It's a great question, and so my understanding is that this is a problem. This is a challenge that Golden Valley is responsible for solving. But we are working with them and collaborating with them to get to those best solutions, because it's not just like how you ramp up and down the power plant. It's also a question of how much supporting battery energy storage we install, either in conjunction with this facility, the wind facility itself, or in the load center here in Fairbanks. And it's also like how you approach coordination with regulating these renewables with the broader grid. So our sister utilities on the rest of the rail belt. And so ongoing engineering studies are being done. Engineering and economic studies are being done to answer that very question by some very respected firms, looking at Golden Valley system in particular and the rail belt as a whole, to identify what the most cost-effective way to integrate these variable resources are, and exactly what that additive cost is, how much cost, what the net impact on cost is, basically how much cost you're avoiding by offsetting the need to burn fuel and to purchase fuel, and the O&M on those existing plants, minus the additional cost from like inefficiencies or having to run a plant on low load just to be ready in case the wind power drops off. And the other thing that is an example of this, of how we're working towards solutions on this, is wind forecasting and understanding, being able to predict the power output from the facility at some level of confidence. It doesn't have to be perfect, but some level of confidence allows the utility to make operational changes and dispatch changes to anticipate, and based on a probabilistic outcome, like, well, even if the power drops off from the wind farm at this moment and we have to use that most expensive plant, that's okay, because we're saving so much in fuel right now by doing it the way that by doing it the way that we're doing it, and having that predictive power over how much energy is going to be available from the wind can can really help reduce the overall cost of integration. So that's another important part in conjunction with all these operational and infrastructure changes.
I can put some pictures to what Andrew just said. Can you guys see the screen here?
Yes.
It's a little small, but just for quick visual, one of those modeling efforts, which included all of the relationships between the steam turbine in North Pole combined cycle and the gas turbines and their ramp rates and all of that, and not just what the spec sheet said, but the way Golden Valley actually operates it. And there are opportunities to operate it a little differently, but those aren't even included here necessarily. What you see is that the blue is the purchased power up over the intertie in particular, and a little bit of Healy 1.
And the base load from like North Pole combined cycle as well in the schedule.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, the minimum load for North Pole combined cycle is in the blue. The green is the wind generation. The orange is the fast cycling thermal liquid fuel assets, naphtha or diesel, which as you noted are more expensive. But in a typical day without wind, nearly all of the green would be orange. It would be liquid fuel operating, with a far higher cost. So to Andrew's point, the total integral under the curve, the total amount of fuel consumed is so vastly reduced that it doesn't quite matter that you're off the perfect efficiency of the gas turbine. That's not economically important. And then the other thing we show here is the battery energy storage. So some amount of battery energy storage economically should be installed along with a project like this. And Golden Valley is pursuing that via a couple different methods to help support the project. And then the other chart I just wanted to show to complement what Andrew said is this one is the wind in the room. But
You locked up there for a second, Matt.
Say again.
okay, am I still here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is an actual wind farm in Alaska, a large-scale wind farm. And the dotted blue line is the forecasted power 24 hours in advance. And the green line is the actual produced power at the time of it. So as you can see, they're extremely close together day after day. And occasionally it's completely wrong. It should have been at 50% production, and it was actually at whatever that is, 15 or 20% production. So occasionally it's wrong, but that's okay because we have the fast moving liquid fuel assets in Golden Valley's portfolio already to support that. It doesn't mean that's an easy transition or operational change for them, for the dispatch team. But these are things that, as Andrew said, we've been studying first without them, and then as we've been working together and looking at this project, studying together for a couple of years.
Okay. John, I see your hands up, but I also see that I've got Gary and Meadow on, and we may have to circle back around with GBA. They're looking at some other kinds of energy storage as well. I know they're looking at essentially a straight upgraded BESS with lithium ion batteries, but I thought they were in discussions and submitted a joint grant application for Westinghouse long-term energy storage, which would be a substantial amount of energy storage. We just have to get more specs on that. But John, your hand's up, sir.
Yeah, thank you. As I understand it, one of the questions that came up in the public meetings was the lighting question. And so these towers, I presume, we're going to have aviation warning lights on them. What can you say about that? And are there ways to mitigate that by shielding it from the night sky somehow? And what are your considerations there?
Yeah, the project will have to, these are tall structures, and aviation is an important resource and activity here in Alaska, especially for all the remote communities that are accessed from Fairbanks, for example. And some of these ridges are served, when we are out there on the site, we see planes flying over, headed out to the villages out there and or the landscapes beyond. And so so aviation is definitely a concern, and being over 200 feet in height, they fall under the FAA's regulations for needing to be fully lighted structures, and that lighting has to be monitored and ensured that it's operational all the time. Otherwise, there's fines and, more importantly, safety risks for aviation. And so yeah, this would be similar to if you've ever been in Anchorage at night and looked out at Fire Island there in Cook Inlet. It would be similar to that. There's some red lights that blink at this, at the same time, pulsate essentially across the top of each of the towers. And so those just simply have to be visible at all times. And so there's not really much that can be done in terms of shielding that, because as far as I know, because they need to be visible for incoming aviators to see where they are. But in general, yeah, it is something that we're thinking about. We've done some initial. Matt, if you could go to the last slide, the color figure of the visual impact analysis. We've done some initial visual impact analysis, and the different colors here represent red represents the largest number of. It's basically the brighter the color, the more red it is, the more turbine hubs that you would be able to see from a given location. And so, just as for an example, basically everywhere in Fairbanks, you wouldn't be able to see any of the project in any of the actual turbines from anywhere in Fairbanks. Once you get onto some of the hills, especially hills that have either west facing or northwest facing aspects along the Parks Highway, or maybe, for example, in the Moose Mountain area, or residents that are closer to the project out near Murphy Dome, they might see, they would see a larger number of turbine hubs, and that's where the lights would be located. So we can share this data, and this will give you an idea of where, what those visual impacts will be. There's also two shapes or circles on the map here, buffer zones, and the inner one, the blue line there, represents a 16-kilometer buffer, and that's the zone in which it's typically considered that you would be within the zone of significant visual contrast. And so it's like that visualization that I showed you of in another picture of the turbines on the ridge when viewed from Murphy Dome. So you would see them, and you would see the distinct towers and blades rotating if you're within that blue zone and you have a view of one of the turbines, so you're in one of those colored areas. And another thing to note is that this is also assuming that there are 0 trees, which we know in the interior, it's very hard to find a location where there are no trees. The green outline is a larger buffer, about 32 kilometers, that represents the zone of where a casual observer might notice the project if they have a clear view through the sky of the project. And so much beyond those, although there's red colors, and you can see, some parts of North Pole show up with some purple hubs, you're not really going to be able to notice that the project much beyond this green boundary there. So we've started looking at this and thinking about this, and want to talk to the community about discuss, what these impacts are and what we can do to mitigate those or at least understand what they could be, and discuss that with you.
Just one quick follow-up question. So along roadways, in terms of protecting night sky visibility, if you put a shield on the top of the light so that it doesn't shine straight up, it makes a big impact on night viewing. Is there any possibility to prevent some of the radiation from going straight up?
I'm not sure I can look into that, but it's also important to realize that we need the planes that are flying in the airspace above the hub also need to know where those turbines are, because we can't put lights on the ends of the blades, and those are 75 meters above the top of the hub, which is the lighted component. And so I don't think so, but it's a good question. It's something I can look into.
Is this roughly akin, or the kind of lights we're talking about, roughly akin to, say, the red light that's on top of the stack there at UAF?
Yes.
Yeah, we're not talking about spotlights
No. These are aviation warning lights that are
or lighthouse being cast across the great beyond. Okay.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and John, I would only add that if the concern is kind of the creation of light pollution, like, I'm a materials scientist, but I'm not a physicist or light physicist. But again, I think getting a sense with Eva Creek or with Fire Island, next time, obviously it's tough with Fire Island because there is a lot of other ambient light. One thing I wanted to point out, by the way, is the Fire Island project, just for context, for those who have seen it and can get a sense of what that red blinking light looks like, that's about 5.5 miles from Anchorage. This project would be 20 miles from Fairbanks. So it's a different kind of proximity in that sense as well. But the lights themselves do not have so much lumen power that they fill up the sky, right? I've seen some of the blinking lights in Fairbanks when there's a low level cloud, and it can be quite powerful when you're close to it. But at that distance, I think it'd be the only way to really see that is to maybe go look at Eva or Fire Island.
Well, with that, and again, we do have GVA's communications director here, so we may be fixing to have a little field trip, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see if we can pull that off. All right, well, guys, thank you so much for the update. Again, we are past the top of the hour, but I would allow, do we have any further questions or comments? Okay. All right, well, again, guys, thank you very much. Very interesting. I hope you'll think of FEDC in this group as you progress, because we'd love more updates as this thing moves forward.
Yeah. One thing I will say is Faith's put together a great website for us with some of this information. A lot of this information is up there. And then there's also a place to sign up where she's creating quarterly newsletters on the progress of our development. So if you sign up on the website there, you can stay tuned as to the latest developments there.
Okay.
Yes, Representative.
What's the name of the website?
AlaskaRenewables.com.
Just a hint, make sure the berry pickers, the ptarmigan hunters, and the aurora viewers are aware of what you're doing sooner than later.
Yeah. Which is a lot of people in Fairbanks, a lot of us here. Yeah.
All right, and here's the website. Well, all right, everybody, this has been great. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and wind her down. I'm working on presentations coming up. I can't remember if I have anything specifically on docket. Oh wait, next week is Thanksgiving, is it not? Thanksgiving week?
Thanksgiving week.
Yes, Thanksgiving week. So we may just take a break so that everybody can go travel and get ready for Turkey Day. But again, I'll let you guys know what's coming. Beyond that, again, gentlemen, thank you so much, and lady, thank you so much for your presentation. And yeah, we'll keep watching this as we move along.
Thanks,
all right,
everyone. Stay in touch, and yeah, we're gonna have some more meetings. as you mentioned, to continue to get the word out. I think a lot of it is just about people learning at this stage what the project will be, and you know, we're very excited to get the community's input and suggestions and hear your concerns. So thank you very much for taking your time to be here.